Alright, time for the second of my 4 August 10 years later videos. These are probably all gonna go up at a pretty close time, but I am not gonna film them all on the same day. It is 11 o'clock at night right now. I am not about to film 2 more videos after this. Regardless, welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And here we actually have a record that I previously reviewed. I always find it interesting when I talk about albums that I previously reviewed in this series. And now we have another example of that. As you can tell from the title, the record that we'll be talking about today is the 2011 Weeknd mixtape Thursday. This was the second mixtape from the Legend of the Fall himself, Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd. It was the second project in Abel's trilogy of mixtapes and the quick follow-up to his legendary, wildly innovative debut, House of Balloons. That tape dropped in March of 2011, this one came in August. Much like that project, this was a 9-track record stretching just about 50 minutes, though the addition of the bonus track on the trilogy reissue made it 10 tracks in just under an hour, expanding on the alternative R&B sounds that Abel brought out on House of Balloons. And while House of Balloons felt in a lot of ways just like a collection of songs about Abel's nihilism, this was one of his first attempts at creating a record with an overarching story, as he discussed a contentious open relationship with a woman where all of their love and best moments were spent on Thursday. Now, this was a record I was very excited to revisit. As I mentioned, I first reviewed this project back in 2017 on my blog, and you can find that linked in the description, though I don't recommend it because much like many of my 2017 reviews, it's horrifically under-detailed. I was really not good at explaining what made songs work and not work back then, and the Thursday review is a perfect example. Either way, I did enjoy the mixtape quite a bit when I first reviewed it, and I honestly liked it even more than House of Balloons at the time. I was interested in going back though because, as many of you remember when I talked about House of Balloons for this series, I had a much more glowing and positive opinion on that mixtape than I did back in 2017. I was able to appreciate it a lot more and enjoy it way more, so part of me was curious as to whether that would apply to Thursday. Ironically, I don't still stand by my take that it's better than House of Balloons, which might make you think I'll be more negative in this video, but actually, no. The only reason I don't like it more than House of Balloons now is because I've been able to appreciate House of Balloons a lot more with my re-listen. Otherwise, I actually enjoyed my time with Thursday more now than I did back in 2017. I will also quickly point out that much like with House of Balloons, Abel reissued the original version of Thursday on streaming services for its 10th anniversary, as the trilogy re-release was the only one that was previously available. Obviously, I listened to both of them in preparation for this video, and while I don't think there's one version that's objectively better than the other, I will say there are some notable differences between the two. Generally speaking, the original version sounds a lot rougher than the trilogy re-release. The overall bass on the record is a lot grittier and heavier, and Abel's vocals are mixed in a way where they sound more spaced out. In a way, this adds to the tripped out feel of the tape, but also it places a lot of the production more front and center and emphasizes Il Angelo and Doc McKinney's work a bit more than Abel's voice. It's really up to personal preference which one you listen to. Do you want the rougher aesthetic to be more fleshed out, or do you want it to be a bit more cleaned up so you can appreciate Abel's vocals more, and also maybe not get as much of an ear sore? For me, I'm fine with putting the trilogy version in my regular rotation over the original, but I think it's a cool idea to listen to both versions yourself, just to see what you like the most. Anyway, on to the actual songs themselves. There are quite a few tracks that I've gotten plenty of replays out of. For example, Life of the Party has been by far my favorite track from this tape, and it's been the one that I've given the most replays to. It's also one that reminds me of why I cringe at my old reviews, because I literally said I was intrigued by the way this one sounds while hardly expounding on why I was intrigued by it other than that it used guitars. Regardless, yes, those guitars are damn awesome, and I love just how the song manages to be bombastic but also atmospheric. I listen to a song like this and all I can imagine is someone at a wild-ass party, but right as the party is getting nuts, everything freezes around you. I know that's an oddly specific description, but that's what I hear when I hear this track. Abel's vocals are sultry and mysterious on the song, and the chorus is absolutely killer. I've gotten too many plays out of this one over the years, definitely one of my favorites from the trilogy era. Rolling Stone was a song I also enjoyed during my first listen, and I think it grew on me even more with repeat listens. Also, it's probably one of the only songs on here where I don't cringe at my ridiculous review of it. That electronic guitar swell at the beginning that leads into the more subdued instrumental passage is brilliant, and while it's a minor thing, there's this sound throughout it that sounds like a light waterfall of some kind that I really like. Abel sing raps through his verses, and I really enjoy his flows. Only thing I wrote that I disagree with is that I did didn't like the hook before. While it's very minimal, I enjoy it a lot more now. Either way, another great song and one I've returned to quite a bit. Lonely Star was also a track I enjoyed when I first reviewed this project, and I still enjoy it a lot now. Abel introduces the Lonely Star character, a woman that he only sees on Thursdays, and he does so over this eerie, dark instrumental that has some busy drums and a bit of a rock feel to it. Abel largely stays in his higher register here, as his vocals feel a little whiny, but to the extent that he's desperately yearning for this woman. As a way to kick off the mixtape, it's definitely excellent, and it's rounded out by what I think is one of the most memorable choruses from the trilogy. Heaven or Las Vegas was another track that I enjoyed, but one I didn't initially give a lot of repeat listens to. Listening to it now, I definitely still enjoy it. The beat has a bit of bounce to it that mixes with subtle implementation of guitar plucks, and while Abel's vocals are more filtered, I think that brings a unique layer to the song, adding some dark atmosphere to a track that's actually one of the more upbeat ones on the record. The lyrics are also pretty interesting as Abel delves into his lack of a father figure and how that impacts the decisions he makes in life. I should definitely give this a few more repeat listens, it's quite good. There were also quite a few tracks that grew on me in my return listen as well. The Birds Part 1 was a track I mentioned wasn't one of my favorites on the project, and I honestly never explained why. Typical 2017 Matt. Either way, this one definitely grew on me a bit in my re-listen. Like I had said in my first review, I do love the marching band-esque sound of the drums, and I think that as bombastic as the song can feel, Abel's vocals still feel very front and center, and I think they shine through with plenty of energy and charisma as well. Also, it's nice that we have a track here that gets its point across in 3.5 minutes and manages to stay focused and interesting throughout its entire duration. The Birds Part 2 was another track that gave me a laugher when I look back at my original review. I love that I wrote that it has a really good instrumental sound without explaining in any sort of way why. You could read that line and not have any clue why the instrumental sounded good to me. God, 2017 Matt, what the hell were you doing with yourself? Also, I can't believe 2017 Matt didn't appreciate this one much because it's a stunner. The instrumental is definitely one of the eeriest and darkest on this project, feeling extremely hazy with a mellow beat and some plucky strings. In a way, I hear this and feel like it sounds like a precursor to a few of the tracks we'd hear on My Dear Melancholy, like Hurt You or some of I Was Never There. Abel absolutely dominates this one, making for a track that feels like a very emotional jam. I was really missing out on these Birds tracks in my original review. They're awesome. All that said though, there are a few tracks I'm still not totally in love with. Thursday was a track I was definitely curious to re-listen to, as I notably listed it as my least favorite track on the record, thus making it my least favorite title track from the trilogy of mixtapes. Listening to it now, I could say I do appreciate it a little bit more than I did then, but I do still have some issues with it. I think the instrumental has some good moments with a kind of jingling feel thanks to what sounds like some tambourine-driven production, and Abel himself sounds good as you'd expect. Oddly enough, this is actually a rare moment where I agree with 2017 Matt on something. In my old review, I mentioned that I didn't care much for the hook on this one, and honestly, I'm still not too crazy about it. It just doesn't really stick out, and the kind of fast singing of it feels a bit at odds with the slow pace of the instrumental. It's not too bad, but I don't think I listened to it and feel like I missed something in my old review. The Zone was the first track on the trilogy to have a feature, and it was none other than Drake. It's known at this point that The Weeknd was helped a lot by Drake giving him a very prominent cosign, and he was one of the first big artists that was helping to get Abel's name out there. Should also be said that Abel has mentioned that he nearly gave up almost half of House of Balloons for Drake's Take Care, noting that his debut mixtape would have had more songs on it had Drake not brought him into the studio for Take Care. As it is, this was a track I didn't love when I first heard the mixtape, and hearing it now, I can't say I love it much more. While the beat is pretty simple, I do like the nocturnal vibe of it with these nice, spacey, plucky moments thrown in. Abel sounds very nice as he croons in his higher register, but while I mentioned in my original review that I absolutely loved the hook, I hear it now and honestly don't think it's that strong. I get that the song was going for a chill vibe, but personally it didn't quite stick for me like I hoped it would. I do like Drake's verse a lot more than I originally did, but otherwise this one just kind of drags a bit. Speaking of drags, Gone is by far the longest track on here at 8 minutes, and at times it shows. Like I had said in my original review, I do love how the instrumental is so electronic and tiptoey to the point of feeling like an old school video game. The instrumental can take some of the attention away from Abel's vocals, which at times feel a bit more mumbly than other points on the tape, but he still brings a good amount of power when he does appear. And being a two-part song, I do like how it changes to something much grimier in the second half as well. Even so, I do think it lacks a strong hook, and much like I wrote in my original review, there are a lot of points where the song drags for me. As an 8-minute cut, it absolutely could have been worse, but it's not a song I feel ready to start giving repeat listens to. Fortunately, one track that did grow on me a bit was Valerie. This was the mixtape's bonus track that was included on the trilogy reissue of the project, and I've held the opinion for a while that it's my least favorite of the trilogy trilogy bonus tracks, far behind 28 and especially Till Dawn Here Comes the Sun. In my re-listen, I might still rank it as the lowest of these bonus tracks, but I actually enjoy it far more than before. I think the beat is very hazy, but without feeling like it drags, with heavy drums that dominate the space but still sound great, and one of Abel's more powerful vocal performances on the tape. The moments where his voice kind of cracks through as he puts a bit more energy onto them is palpable. And while I wasn't crazy about the chorus in my first listen, my re-listen showed me that there are quite a few moments I can call hooks on here. This was a great addition to the trilogy reissue and an awesome song as a whole. Overall, I'm in an interesting place with Thursday now that I've given it another listen. On one hand, I don't know if I'd agree with 2017 Matt that this was definitely an improvement over House of Balloons, as that mixtape has grown on me a lot more and I've appreciated a lot more, to the point where I don't know if I'd immediately call this one better than it. On the other hand though, I actually enjoyed my time with Thursday more now than I did before. I liked it when I first reviewed it, but my thoughts are even more positive now, despite the fact that I don't still see it as an improvement over House of Balloons. Take that less as a fault of this project and more as me actually appreciating House of Balloons a lot more. As it is, Thursday is a solid expansion on the Weeknd sound that he showcased on House of Balloons, and it still nails it in regards to creating a fantastic, detailed, descriptive atmosphere. Abel himself still sounds great, and some of the production can feel a bit livelier, continuing to bring this in an interesting, different direction than what was done before. The only thing that might hold it back in comparison to House of Balloons is that a few of the longer songs on here still feel like they drag a bit. Otherwise, this is still a very strong mixtape, one that I actually enjoy even more now than I did before. Even though I might now put House of Balloons ahead of it, that's not harping on this record because it's still awesome. Back in 2011, I feel like I wouldn't have really been able to appreciate this or any of the other trilogy of mixtapes all that much. When I listened to it and reviewed it in 2017, I enjoyed it quite a bit, honestly even more so than House of Balloons. Listening to it now, as I said, I don't know if I'd still call it an improvement over House of Balloons, but I like this tape even more now than I did then. Back in my original review, I gave the mixtape a good rating, and honestly, this is going to be another instance where I don't stand by the rating I originally gave it. After giving it repeat listens, I feel comfortable bumping that score up from a good to an excellent. Even with a few rare moments that drag, Thursday is still a fantastic record that was a very worthy follow-up to an extremely innovative debut project. But that's just my opinion on this mixtape. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in 2011? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it back then? Hate it back then? Do you still love it now? Do you still hate it now? Are you just completely indifferent towards it? And where would you rank it among the rest of the trilogy? Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And moving right along, the next 10 years later video that I'm going to be doing is going to be on Lil Wayne's The Carter 4. I am not going to film it at this very moment because it is 11:30 at night and I am hot and tired and sweaty. But I'll film it very soon and it'll go up alongside these other 10 years later videos that I've already uploaded, so stay tuned for that. But until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed and I will see you in the next video. Peace.